Ladies and gentlemen, we are being joined today on the program, our brand new legal analyst here at the Experience, and we wanted to introduce him to the folks in the cult of Cornette. He already, of course, has been sponsoring the drive-thru on Mondays for the past few weeks, but it is none other than the star of the law offices of Stephen P. New. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen P. New. Stephen, thank you for being on today.
It's an honor to be with you guys, Jim. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I just wish that this call now was going to be as entertaining as what we've just talked about earlier off the air. But we'll try to live up to those standards. But you and I met in Charlotte at the Fan Fest a number of years ago, and it was almost a deal where I almost ran away from you because here comes an attorney toward me holding papers in his hand. But it turned out it was a gift for me. Which was actually copies of pages of the I guess it's the official West Virginia state law textbooks where the Beckley court case with me and the Midnight Express is taught therein in those books.
Yes, there is a 1990 reported decision in the case books for the state of West Virginia, case decisions, Roy and Ruby Massey the Midnight Express et al., which is Jim Crockett Promotions and all of you guys individually, and then the security company and the armory. So that's the official title of the case. And the case was dismissed at the trial court first, and that dismissal was then appealed to the West Virginia Supreme Court, and that was the reported decision in 1990 from an incident that happened at the Beckley Armory in 1989.
Well, and actually it was 87. I don't mean to correct my own legal analyst, but it was 87. The case was
taken away to go through the. I guess the case was filed then at the 2-year statute in 89 and dismissed, and the reported decision is 90. So
yes, they made a comeback on that. But the thing is that we got caught up in a whole bigger deal than just the initial incident. And of course, it's detailed in the Midnight Express scrapbook, which is a collector's item now and nobody has it. So briefly, after the Rock and Roll Express had left the ring and all the security went with them, security we'll get back to later, to take them back, so make sure that nobody would love on them too much on the way back to the dressing room. And they left us, me and Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane, standing in the middle of the ring. The Raleigh County Armory was sold out. We've got no security at ringside, and the people are mad at us, and we can't get out on the floor to leave because we have no escort. So while we're standing there, somebody picks up they had those big old-fashioned aisle markers, like Section C. It was like a 3-foot giant arrow in the aisleways, and a guy picked one up and threw it like a spear into the ring. And as we saw it coming, it hit Bobby Eaton in the side of the head and scraped all the skin off his neck and knocked him goofy. Stan had seen, allegedly, that is the phrase you used, right? Allegedly.
Allegedly, Stan had seen the man who threw it.
Stan had seen the man who threw it and dove out of the ring on that side as the old man was walking away from the ring, and spun him around and caught him with one shot, knocked him over a row of chairs, broke his cheekbone, crushed his orbital socket, all that good stuff. I jumped out because I had seen basically the same thing. I thought I saw the follow through with the guy had thrown it. It was already in the air, and then him turn around and leave. But Stan was quicker than I was. So once he punched the guy, we jumped back in the ring, and then here came the security. And when we get to the back, Bobby's bleeding. I want the guy arrested, and the cops go back and get him and bring him to us, whereupon I cut a promo on him for 30 seconds, ending with, "We're going to put you under the jail, you black lung motherfucker," which should possibly be my next T-shirt. But at any rate, it would be huge in West Virginia and Eastern Kentucky.
Absolutely.
That was our involvement until we found out that the guy claimed he wasn't the one that threw it, and Stan punched him for no reason, and he sued everybody in sight. And none of the witnesses could agree on anything. They couldn't agree on the number of matches that night. They couldn't agree on who threw the thing. Some said kids, some said the old man, some said somebody else. The only thing that got me off was that everybody agreed I had cussed him unmercifully, but everybody had a different quote from what I had said, and all of them agreed that it was 30 seconds long. So they said, well, nobody could have said all those things in 30 seconds.
But to which I responded to my law school professor, if you know Jim Cornette, professor, he absolutely could have said all of that and more in 30 seconds. So to the extent that the West Virginia Supreme Court was very interested in that particular issue, I assured my law professor first year that you could have, in fact, called him all of those names in the 30-second span of time.
Well, and fortunately, you weren't around for the original adjudication of this case, but the point is, it cost us a little bit of money each, me and Bobby and Stan, but for legal fees and et cetera, after Crockett went out of business, because Crockett picked it up until Turner had taken over. But the big issue was then it was out of our hands because the overriding issue then became, am I correct, the fact that the security was not trained or licensed properly. And the building had, whether was it the building's fault or was it Jim Crockett, the promoter's fault? And that was why the whole thing went to the Supreme Court.
Yes, it was the issue that we study it for still is what is the obligation, either with a written contract or without one, for how adequate the security should be, and whether or not it's foreseeable for the type of event that you're putting on, what type of security there should be. You know, the Supreme Court of West Virginia talked about that part of your all's deal was whipping the fans into a frenzy, was making the fans at this event hate you all, and that element of the wrestling show being put on meant that there should have been more security, regardless of what either Crockett contracted for with the security company or what the security company even thought that it needed or would be okay.
Well, and also during that lawsuit, and this is printed in the Midnight Book also, but I couldn't resist it. But during that lawsuit, Jim Crockett got deposed, and among the questions he was asked was how you pay the guys, how you pay the wrestlers. And what he tried to say actually was pretty close to the old formula of a third of the house goes to the talent and a third of that goes to the main event, and then the rest of the card gets the rest. But Jim Crockett was never known as a great communicator, and he was not explaining it properly anyway, because I think he was trying to lead the opposing attorney down a primrose path. But it reads in deposition form like a Abbott and Costello routine. And then he stooged on himself, because I knew the house that night because I had it recorded. And I knew how many people that the Raleigh County Armory held because I'd run there for Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And I knew what we got paid. So I did all of the statistics and ran his formula and found out we each got shorted $200 and something a piece that night. But nevertheless, Here's actually, while we're on the subject of lawsuits, and I don't know that there's anybody else actually in professional wrestling who got so much heat their case ended up in the Supreme Court and ended up in a legal textbook. So maybe we can put the cult out on that fact-finding mission. But as an attorney and as a personal injury attorney, and somebody who regularly goes after people whose negligence has caused people to be injured, I've tried to tell this to independent wrestlers and to promoters that run independent shows, and especially when it seemed like it was big when I first got back involved with Ring of Honor in the mid-2000s, that every out-of-control match had to go out and fight in the crowd, not just at ringside, but in the crowd. And fight down the aisleways, or fight to the concession stands, or fight through the seats so that everybody, can see it up close and personal. And it's really wild and crazy. Or they have to do the dives where not only do they dive outside the ring, but they dive and they both go over the rail, or somebody overshoots the rail, or somebody lands in the audience. How easy, as an accomplished attorney, would it be for you to win a case where some set of parents come to you and say, my 16-year-old daughter or son, more likely a son these days, it's a sausage fest in independent wrestling, my 16-year-old son was sitting in the second row of the wrestling matches at the Armory when one of the wrestlers dove from the ring, flew over the security barricade, and kicked him in the teeth, and now he needs $40,000 worth of dental work. How easy is that for you to win?
I think that it's very easy, Jim. And like I said, there's this concept in the law called proximate cause. If something's not foreseeable, then you can't sue for it in negligence. So in other words, if it's not foreseeable, if it's not likely to flow from the events that are going on, then there's no action that can be maintained for that. When you're talking about, large men out in the crowd, near spectators, then I think that is foreseeable then, that either a spectator could do something, their spot could go wrong, or a guy miss another guy, what have you, and then if it's too close to the spectator could probably recover in negligence for that. And not only that, now everything, the way from the way the guys call the matches to everything. That's kind of well known now.
You didn't used to be able to prove these things. Yeah, there was no way that you could prove it when guys were lying in depositions. Now you can.
Exactly. I mean, we've got 20 years worth of guys on YouTube and podcasts and things like that explaining how those spots are supposed to work. So, I mean, you don't exactly have to be Columbo to do your own investigating as a lawyer to figure out how you'd put your case together. Well, this is the way that spot should have worked, but instead something went wrong. Was it foreseeable it could have gone wrong and a spectator be injured? Then, yeah, I could with a straight face make that case, Jim.
And see, that's the thing I try to tell the promoters and the wrestlers. And in a lot of these indie shows, they get in the habit of doing this stuff because most of the guys there, it's like the mosh pit, right? It's a fucking concert or whatever. And they consider it a badge of honor if they're one of the hero's weapons broke off and whacked them in the side of the head, or they caught a stray shot or whatever. But when you graduate to actual real pro wrestling Pinocchio and become a real boy and you're in front of real crowds in legitimate buildings, you get kicked out of the building if you get a lawsuit because the building doesn't want trouble in their facility. The only reason a lot more lawsuits aren't filed for what happens in independent wrestling is because everybody knows that the promoter doesn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. But especially when I had to get, and I used to tell Kerry Silkin, these guys are going to get you sued, and you're going to be working for somebody else for the rest of your life because so-and-so had to goddamn take this big bump into the crowd for no reason. And then when Sinclair bought it, we had to draw clear rules because now there's $1 billion company behind the promotion.
There is, in my parlance, there is a deep pocket now.
Yes.
So,
yes. But for all
we
the
have
wrestlers,
a deep pocket.
For all the aspiring wrestlers out there and the people who do independent shows and mostly the people who run independent shows, if they think they can recoup anything, you will get sued when the guys leave their designated area where the judge says, you mean this area was clearly delineated with guardrails around the ring as being the wrestler's area, separate from the fans, and they breached that. You're fucked, people. And yep. Ole Anderson in Cleveland one time, a guy comes at him with a fucking knife and he knocks the guy out with the knife and the guy fell on an old man and broke his leg, right? Or no, a kid fell on a kid and broke the kid's leg. And the parents sued Ole for knocking the guy that was trying to stab him onto their child and it cost him $40,000. So I don't know why that the guys these days, both in the ring and in the office, the promoters themselves, if they want to call themselves that, don't see that coming a mile away. It's just waiting to happen, and you could bankrupt some of these guys real easy.
Right, and they need to take care of themselves, their promotions, their talent, a lot more than that. So, because for whatever bright shining moment there may be from swinging a barbed wire bat at somebody near spectators in the crowd, for whatever bright shining moment or what benefit they think they may get from that, I think that the risk far outweighs that benefit. The promoter here in West Virginia, you've been familiar with many years, Jim, Gary Damron, down in Madison.
Yeah.
He doesn't allow any of that kind of stuff. He's a good promoter. He takes care of the talent, and he has clearly listed in the back all of the rules, and they're not to engage with the crowd, can't use weapons or implements, can't use chairs.
I've seen him when I've been over to his shows. I've seen those up there, and I had the same thing in OVW, because we have the commission here in Kentucky. There were certain state laws, you can't do this and that and the other thing, and then at least you've got some protection. Also, if a guy goes into business for himself, you can say it's clearly posted here. So fuck this guy.
Right.
Right. And it's just smart business if you want to make, and that's why Gary's been running the same building for 10 years now. Because he doesn't bring heat.
12-year anniversary, right? He's done a great job there.
And it's that's when you keep relationships with your business or when your buildings, when your business does not cause them to be sued and have to undergo depositions and deal with your ilk, Stephen. No, you're one of the good ones. I've told the people on the program, if you've been wronged or fouled or misused or ill-treated by the big corporations, I've always said Stephen is one of us. He's a wrestling fan, and he will bring the hammer of justice down, or the gavel, in this case, of justice down on your side. But you haven't always been a morally bankrupt attorney. You were once a human being with a soul.
Right, I was a decent human being once upon a time, just a guy here in West Virginia watching wrestling, trying to get ahead in life.
What was the first show because were you in West Virginia there in that part? You were still in the Crockett territory, right? Or did you get some Southeastern, Continental back in the day from Eastern Kentucky?
No, the Southeastern never came over. But the good thing about West Virginia was, and I told Brian this a while back, there was a lot of territories that overlapped here, Jim. We got Mid-Atlantic down in Bluefield and Beckley.
Yeah.
But the other side of the state, Logan, Williamson, Huntington got Georgia Championship Wrestling. And then the WWF started coming down to Huntington mid-'80s as well. So in Huntington in the mid-'80s, 84, 85, you could see a World Championship Wrestling match one weekend and go the next weekend and see a WWF match. The first match go ahead.
I was just going to say, Crockett had the southern part of the state there, but because the Huntington and that area had kind of been part of Sheik's territory, the Georgia office ended up inheriting that when they opened up Columbus and all that stuff to the north. So it was really the joining point for three different territories. Which was your favorite to watch?
I would say Georgia Championship Wrestling was my favorite. I liked the Georgia promotion the most. It seemed to have the biggest talent coming through. Guys with the world title. I also liked the Mid-Atlantic brand a lot back in the early '80s. Before those two kind of got together, and you and your guys came in. I also liked Paffo's ICW, and I don't know how much you knew about them, but they ran Southern West Virginia in the late '70s and early '80s as well, and I really liked Paffo's promotion and coming to all these small towns in the coal fields of Southern West Virginia, and they'd run 3 or 4 nights in some towns close by here. You know, and it was hard to follow the storylines on TV because, you know, I don't know exactly how Angelo was sending those tapes out, or, you know, it was hard to have continuity exactly.
Here's the
but
thing.
I enjoyed the shows.
Here's the thing. Sometimes it was hard to follow even when you saw them in order sometimes. No, I joke, but early on, their studio TV, you know, was one that you needed to see. It had really, even though it was always low budget, and it was at the old Channel 62 in Lexington is where they shot it. Now it's 36, but
right.
They had a small studio with just a few people in it. But the TV matches were really good because at the start they had guys like Garvin and Orton Jr. and Malenko and Roop and Savage. And the TVs were really good because they had great in-ring matches. Actually, at the time, maybe better matches than the Memphis show. But then the thing long-term became, especially after they lost a lot of that top talent, the booking got kind of sideways. I think they were grasping by, you know, the early 80s, and that's when you started seeing. I remember one time they opened up a box and there was Pez Whatley tied to a chair in lingerie and a wig. I don't know why. I have no idea why.
Well, he also had a feud with Garvin where he wore a mop on his head, and his nickname was Mophead Whatley. And I went to matches in Madison or Oceana 1, and Pez was wearing the mop. I said, you couldn't give me $1 million to wear a mop on my head and get on TV. But nevertheless, there's Pez Whatley. You know, and you had guys like Hustler Rip Rogers and some other guys like that. And down at WrestleCon the other day, I brought up the Crusher Broomfield gimmick to the one-man gang, and he said, I can't believe you even remember that stuff. And I said, absolutely. You brought in a young kid, Randy Savage's enforcer, and he couldn't believe that I remembered that promotion. But West Virginia was a great place to watch live wrestling in the early to mid-'80s. And then, you know, I remember seeing you and the Midnight Express come through and rock and roll, and America's Team, the Russians, all that, Road Warriors, Four Horsemen through the Great American Bashes in the late 80s, 86 to 89 or whatever, and that was just fantastic.
And then, of course, at least we didn't get pro wrestling kicked completely out of the state of West Virginia with our lawsuit. I'm surprised they don't have a checkpoint when you go into the state now. Are you a wrestler? Go over there. We need to speak to you. But
well, Al Snow swore to me the other day that was the case. He said he got arrested right in Huntington on 64 as soon as he came in, and so from now on, I'm going to blame you, Cornette. I was saying, look.
I think the notice is up at all of the rest areas when you go into the state. But let me ask you this, because I mentioned on the drive-through that it is worth it. It's like the Briscoe Brothers Body Shop. If you want to commit a crime, we encourage all of the listeners to do it in the state of West Virginia because you can get them off. But even if you don't live in West Virginia, you're taking cases now all over the country. How did this come about where you spread out and you're taking these big national cases?
Well, what it is for certain cases, such as, medications that have been recalled, hernia mesh, those types of cases, Jim, anything like that you see kind of the advertising for the national class actions. I do a lot of that, and I'll be asked by some of my friends in other states, in other words, to even get involved in those types of national cases, and to try to round up all of them that I can in the state of West Virginia, join up with someone, and then pursue those cases. So any product that has a national reach, Takata airbags, defective drugs, hernia mesh, that type thing, is something that, even though my office is located in West Virginia, it's certainly something that my office will be involved in. So,
what about Vince Russo's booking? What about Vince Russo's booking, along with hernia mesh and poisonous drugs and things of that nature? Could you do anything? Could we start a class action for Vince Russo's booking?
here, I don't know that enough people have ever been affected by Vince Russo's booking to constitute a class, Jim. You've got to have a large number of people that have been affected.
There's been a large number, but none of them were paying customers. Oh my God! But if you do, and I interrupted your pitch, but if you do want to get a hold of you for more information, as we've said before, it is newlawoffice.com or 888-692-8084. And we're gonna, and also if you're a dumb independent wrestling promoter who didn't listen to Steven's advice and gets sued, he will not take your case because he doesn't feel sorry for stupid people.
That's exactly right. Stupid people and a-holes are out at my office. I try to avoid them like the plague every chance I get. So, every now and then an asshole will sneak in on you, and it takes some time through the case to bear fruit, and you figure that out. But, I try to be as proactive about it as possible.
Is there any truth to the rumor that Sean Hannity is going to be revealed as one of your clients? I'm just
no. But I bet that Deep Throat ends up being one of Hannity's before this is all over with. So,
and you know what? In this presidential scandal, the code name Deep Throat would actually have a double meaning.
Well, that's exactly right. It's it's more than just a code name. It's a way of life as far as the Hannity and Cohen and Trumps are concerned.
Do you have any idea who may try to represent Donald Trump next? Because every prominent attorney, they've done everything but try to dig Clarence Darrow up. Who's gonna represent either Trump or Michael Cohen now?
Nobody we've ever heard of, Jim. I mean, honest to God, it's going to be a My Cousin Vinny without Marissa Tomei as the brains of the operation. That's who's going to end up representing the President of the United States. It's going to be some ham and egger from Atlantic City, New Jersey, that you've never heard of, who Trump will pay a pot of money to and just go and commit malpractice, the likes of which the world has never seen.
But if it's a guy from Atlantic City, it's gonna be that attorney that's got that gambling problem, and Trump said, "Here, I'll clear your debt to the house off if you'll represent me." It'll be
that's exactly right. You're into the Trump for a couple $1,000,000. Why don't we just let bygones be bygones and let that constitute the retainer?
That'll be that's the pro boner defense, I think, is all right. Brunch. Enough legal humor, ladies and gentlemen. But once again, we encourage you to be represented by one of us, a man who knows his great wrestling as well as his great law, Stephen P. New, our new legal analyst, no pun intended, at the Jim Cornette Experience. Stephen, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jim. It's an honor to sponsor your program. I've loved your work for a long time. Love being associated with your continuing contribution to the professional wrestling community, and a cult member. What can you say?
I hope all of our business relationship continues to be like this instead of me retaining you for any. I don't want to be injured or wronged or potentially arrested again in the state of West Virginia. Well, at least I'm covered, but still, I'm trying to stay out of trouble.
Right. I've told Stacy a time or two, look, just call when I see something on the horizon there. I will take on the NRA and Dana Loesch. I'm not afraid of her or her mascara. So, bring it on.
Instead of Mill mascara, it's Dana's mascara.
Dana mascaras, yes.
Oh, all right. 2 shows on Friday. And we'll just take a small bow.